presentation to take about 25 minutes, and then there should be plenty of time for Q&A if needed. And I think I did not get around to introducing myself, so thank you both for joining today. My name's Jana Kimmel, and I am the Executive Director of the Chronic Pain Project. And the goal today of this session is to share a bit more about the Chronic Pain Project, talking a little bit more about who we are, a little bit about what we do, and also, of course, how people can get involved. I am going to be recording. You're welcome to leave cameras off or on, whatever you're comfortable with. And again, just please hold any questions until the end. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. I want to share a little bit more about the mission and vision. We have a little bit of a niche in the world, and so it's important to share the details of that. Give you an overview of the project itself. Share some insights from those who have participated as far as their demographics and how they're thinking about their chronic pain. I have a couple of samples of the art and some quotes from some interviews that we've conducted. And then, as promised, ways you can get involved or share with others who might be interested. So to start with, just who are we? Who is the Chronic Pain Project? Our mission, as you can see here, bringing visibility to the invisible experience of living with chronic pain through art. And what that really means is that we want to invite people living with chronic pain to create art. And that art will get shared through our online gallery and through real-time exhibits in person in Portland, and eventually we're hoping they'll be across the country and maybe even across the world. We are doing this to bring awareness to the often invisible experience of living with chronic pain. What we've heard is that some illnesses or conditions, and what we've lived, some illnesses or conditions are visible. And think about that as somebody you know might use crutches. I use glasses. Sometimes you can see a broken leg or a missing limb or even a hearing aid. But what we found is that many people living with chronic pain do so in a very invisible way. And so the goal of the project is to help those folks and folks like myself and many of our board members to be seen, be understood, and doing that through community, through events, through exhibits, and through workshops. So to start with, what is chronic pain? The definition in the medical community is pain that lasts 3 months or longer. But if you look at it a little more deeply, we've got some pieces bolded here. Chronic pain is persistent pain. So it does last a long time, but think about, as an example of one of our members, waking up every day with your back hurting every single day. So it's not just the pain, it's kind of the exhaustion of the persistence. And acute pain, which is really important, right? You put your hand on the stove, it's a warning signal for injury. But the chronic pain often, not always, but often continues even after the original cause has healed, or for some of us, there's no identifiable cause. And then it also begins to impact daily functioning. So it can impact your sleep, your mood, and specifically your overall quality of life. And then for many, I talked to someone yesterday who said, I feel like this is a second job. You're managing your medical appointments, you're managing your medications, you're managing all of the things you try to do at home to make sure that that pain doesn't get to a point where you have to go get medical care. I also realized that I would like to disclose that I personally do live with chronic pain. We'll get into that in just a minute, kind of my story, but all of this is very personal as well as a professional endeavor. But I am not alone, which has been wonderful to find out through this project. And those of you who live with chronic pain are not alone either. 10% of the global population, or 60 million people, which sounds like a lot of people to me, are affected and living with chronic pain. And in some countries, that number is up to 25%. The statistic is also that 1 in 10 people develop chronic pain every year. So even if they weren't born with it or they don't have it currently, that's something that comes upon them. And what they also see is that there's unequal access to management. So there are countries that have a higher burden of pain and perhaps that leads to a lower likelihood of effective treatment. I have a link to one of the articles that we got these statistics from. One of the big issues for people in chronic pain is it's very hard for us to find each other because we don't talk about it a lot. And so seeing these numbers starts to help people feel like, okay, I'm not alone, I'm not crazy, and there are people like me that I can connect with. And then why art? People say, well, okay, you're in chronic pain, go see your doctor, but there's actually a lot that we can do by creating. One of the things creating does is it sort of creates this empowerment. You are showing that you have another skill. You're showing that there's something else you can do with your time. And you also are feeling less defined than just, I am a person with pain. I am also a person who creates. I am a person who brings beauty into the world. We've also seen a lot of data around pain, participating in visual art activities, reducing pain. Um, People talk about, I have one woman who participated and said she was a potter. And every time she got into her pottery studio, her pain didn't necessarily disappear, but it kind of fades to the background in a way so that you can really just focus on the art that you're creating. And so it's really giving you some of that critical distance from something that can really overtake your mind and your body. And it really has shown to improve overall mental health, overall quality of life by taking part in and actively creating art. And so, how did this get started? So, based on all of that research and based on my personal history, my personal places where I like to spend time, I started to bring some folks together. So, I will start with my personal history around pain. And I have had chronic pain at the age of 10. I fell in a class, and for the next 10 years, I was on and off crutches because I had some kind of pain in my ankle that no scans, no labs highlighted. They didn't know where it came from. And to this day, I don't really know what that was about. In my 20s, I started having migraines. In my 30s, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I've always been just one of those bodies that's kind of the canary in the cage that if somebody's going to feel something, it's going to be me. Alongside that, I've also been very creative. I've worked in theater, in costume design, I've made clothing, I've made jewelry. I like to create, I like to make. That's very fulfilling for me. And then my career for the last 20 years has been in that purple circle in the world of qualitative research. And that means that I worked at a number of companies, largely in healthcare, providing insights into how providers and patients might use various health products, including things like continuous glucose monitors for people with diabetes. And I worked for a company that provides support for people with musculoskeletal pain through doing remote physical therapy. So people can use an app to do their PT at home. And all of those things kind of came together during close to the end of my time at the company doing kind of digital physical therapy. We had hoped to do a display in the office of some art from our customers so that people working in the company, if they didn't experience chronic pain, maybe they could get an inkling as into what it might feel like to live with chronic pain. Because that organization was a startup, we just really didn't have the bandwidth to do something like that, which meant that I could take it with me. So I took it with me and started talking to a bunch of friends and looking at the world as it is. And we created the Chronic Pain Project, which is about bringing in people's stories, having them make art, and creating community around chronic pain. So this is our fantastic board. Between us, so we started in December of 2023, and we have several researchers, people specifically with a lot of experience in healthcare research. And that is, again, kind of the human side of research, less clinical and more how do you get people to have health experiences that feel good and feel positive and make sense. We have a retired therapist and a person who specializes in marketing right now. 4/5 of us right now live with chronic pain, and we have a commitment to have at least 50% of our board people who experience chronic pain. And then we meet monthly online to plan events, grow the vision, and keep our projects moving forward. We are always looking for more talented board members, particularly with backgrounds, perhaps administrative or technical or financial right now. Those are things that would be really valuable to us. I thought about the board today and realized that between us, we have about 100 years of healthcare related work or lived experience combined. So, in being on the giving side of healthcare or the receiving side of healthcare, we have a lot of experience there. Um, and like I said, we're still seeking folks, either volunteers or board members. And then a lot of our folks come to us as creators, and we don't talk about art as something sort of high and mighty. To us, art is anything and anybody can create art. We have something from a lovely, simple pencil sketch where a woman drew a line about her day, and the bottom is green because she was feeling good, and then the top is red because her pain spiked. It's a very simple colored pencil drawing, but it gets the point across. So we don't currently have any criteria for participating. What we do is we ask folks, in order to get into our pipeline, we ask them to take a short background survey so we understand who's participating and how we can get engaged. We usually ask people to then create a piece of art or share with us a piece that perhaps they've already made. And then about 75% of our participants take part in an interview. And in that interview, some of our therapists and some of our researchers who are trained to have these conversations have a set of questions or a repeatable set of questions that we use to really learn a little more about things like people's first experience of pain. What does the pain give you? What does pain take away from you? And then we always love to hear more about the actual art. We usually ask folks to hold up their art and talk to us about what it means to them. The interview part is optional, but part of our goal is to not just have the art, but really share the story of each creator if they're interested. We also have a number of offerings. So once we get that art in, one of the things we are doing are workshops. So those might be hands-on for new people or existing artists who want to come in and create a piece. Sometimes we have collage, sometimes we have watercolors or both, and just invite people to make a piece of art that identifies for them what they feel that they're managing that's invisible, whether it's chronic pain or something else. We have one coming up August 7th at the Vancouver, Washington Community Library. We also host exhibits, and our next exhibit is also at the Vancouver, Washington Community Library. And the art from our artists, from about 28 of our artists, will be on the walls on 3 floors there for folks to enjoy. And then right now we also host groups. And in those groups, people are welcome to bring art they've created before, perhaps art in process, and come talk to others about it and talk about your experience of living with chronic pain and what it means, what does your green line mean? And what do these swirls mean? And what did it feel like to make this art? And then hear from others how they're receiving it. And the few groups we've had were incredibly well received. People really enjoyed knowing that they weren't alone in their experience, and people really enjoyed hearing how others were reacting to their art. It's usually we all get chills. It's kind of a cool experience to see how impactful it can be, again, to see a visual versus, the picture's worth 1,000 words kind of moment. And I mentioned before, one of the ways we get folks into the project is by having them take a short survey. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of the data from that survey. I promise not to get too data heavy. We currently have 38 participating artists. Those artists are across 5 countries, including Canada, the US, Germany, United Kingdom, and Australia. So largely English speaking. We don't currently have a lot of folks who can conduct interviews in another language. That is definitely an area we'd like to grow in. And then across the U.S., we have artists from 18 different cities from um, actually, and yeah, the one I'd say the furthest north is our person in Vancouver, BC. And then we have someone, I think, down in Kentucky. We've got someone in New York, in Harlem. We've got folks all over the world, and one in Austin, Texas. So we kind of cover the corners of the US. And interestingly, we ask folks if they identify as having a disability. And what we've heard is that 75% do identify as having a disability. We also heard a majority of our folks have mid or low back pain, head pain, and shoulder pain. And those are the primary areas, although you can see there's widespread, there's arms, there's everywhere. There are a lot of different places we can experience pain, but we were not meant to walk upright. So that mid and low back comes up quite a bit. But we all have that common experience of kind of feeling invisible. We also had what was something that was surprising to our team was that the majority of participants are currently under 44 and they've been in pain over 10 years. So almost a quarter of their lives already, they've been in pain. Um, Super depressing to me, but that is the reality. What I love is that we have a generation, mostly young women, who are out and talking about their pain and trying to make it more visible and trying to share that narrative of what their lives are like. And as you see here, we also have a very large white population participating right now. We would love to change that. So please help us reach out to folks of all ethnicities, all orientations. We are open to anyone and everyone participating. One of the other things we do in the survey is we ask folks if they could write a letter to their pain, what would they say? And I'm going to just read the first one and the second one here, or first and third. The gist of all of them is this sense of why me, a sense of why now, and the importance of being gentle to ourselves when we have these challenges. So one person said, "You feel like my enemy, and you always have. I wish you would leave me alone. I don't deserve you. Why have you picked me? I don't know what it feels like to be at home in my body. Is this the price I pay for being a sensitive person?" And then our third person here in the orange says, "I know you're just a messenger. You're letting me know something's wrong, but I wish you wouldn't visit so often." And so you start to see, even with these four quotes, kind of the themes of why me, why now? We don't have good answers for that, but we can help people connect and realize there are 60 million of you. So hopefully you don't feel as alone. And now I would like to share some of the beautiful art and some of the quotes that we've gotten from folks. And again, not going to read you the whole quote. I'm going to kind of summarize to the piece in bold. You can see our entire gallery on our website, which is chronicpainproject.org. We have a digital gallery there. This particular individual talked about, she had some very quotable moments, or they had some very quotable moments, and they talked about humanity connects with one another. Humanity connects with one another through their pain, through their shared experiences, their pain, their anxiety, and the fuck ups. And you can see they created, this is a pencil sketch, I believe, of their pills and the medications. They talked a lot about all the things they have to take with them when they leave the house. And many of us have that shared experience of needing a toolkit when you leave the home. This piece is by a gentleman who has low back pain, one of our board members, and he talks about how pain has taken away a degree of freedom. And again, we hear that from many of our members. It's hard to plan. You might think you're going to do something one day, but your pain flares up. Or you might have done something previously. We hear that a lot too. And that's not really something that your body lets you do anymore. So that is another theme that we hear. On the left, we have some art by Leanna. And They talked about their art as I'm trying to bore holes in my paper. So there's a concentrated intensity. I believe they have endometriosis, and so there was a real intensity and kind of visceral feeling to their art and their pain. And on the right, we have a piece by Leah Marie Schultz. She talked about being on a precipice in so many ways, and that it was important to capture that. Another typo there, Blakely. I'm going to fix that. Important to capture that in some way. And this was her way. She talked about being kind of at a shifting point. She was actually having she was doing a lot of work to move forward into a less painful life and having a lot of success with that. So this was a moment in her time. And as you can see, we also get not always 2D art. We sometimes get 3D art. Jen here talks about having migraine and having tried everything. She's read everything. And one of her biggest dislikes is when somebody comes up and says, "Have you tried such and such?" And of course, she has. And her dress, which is a little bit hard to tell from this image, but her dress has all of the things that people recommended to her. So, if you tried this drug, if you tried yoga, have you tried meditation? And it kind of feels like it's coming at her, and she's kind of wearing all of those recommendations. So that was a pretty powerful piece. And on the right is a piece of art by a woman named Jo. And she talks a lot about the weight of carrying the pain that's always there. And if you can see that she's got kind of those levels, those weights coming off of that particular sculpture. And on the bottom, I think it's a pressure gauge, she told me. So again, kind of that pressure and the mask that she has to wear when she goes out into the world. So these are really, really hard topics, and they've created a lot of beauty around these topics. So those are just a few of our artists. Like I said, there are more in our online gallery and more at our events. This is just a view of our event we had last September. We rented a space in downtown Portland and were able to hang art from all of our artists. We had a little bit of a fundraiser. People did an amazing job of connecting, speaking to one another, realizing that they're not alone in their pain. And that was our launch event. And then, as I mentioned, on July 1st, the beautiful Vancouver, Washington Community Library will be hosting a show of our artists for July and August. So I encourage you, this show will be free because it's in a public library. They have space for some of our sculptures in these lovely plinths, and then some beautiful gray space for us to share the art on the walls. And then finally, we love to encourage folks to get involved. Share it with your friends, of course. You can volunteer, and volunteering can be as much or as little time as you have. Things that people have done in the past are either helping with web or graphic design, helping with interviews. We have a great need for some administrative support if you're a very organized person. You can lead an event. You can lead something like a book group or a movie group or help us put on some more workshops. You can join the board. And as I mentioned, the board, we're looking for kind of annual planning type financial support, development or fundraising support, legal support. And of course, you can create art. We'd love to continue growing our community of artists. We're in talks with some folks about having future shows. Those are not locked down yet, but as they do get locked down, we will be sharing those forward. And then if you are an ally, if you'd like to support, some of the things we're looking for support with are things like recommending an exhibit space. So if there's a library, a cultural center, or some unique space you're aware of, please let us know. We're still looking for interesting places to explore. If you have an exhibit space, there's a doctor's office that needs some art, if there's a space that you have that you think the art would work in a coffee shop, please let us know. We're also looking for some storage space. We probably only need like 5x5 unit or a 5x5 space, but we do need some space to store the art when it's not being shown. And of course, the best thing you can do is help us spread the word, whether it's on social media or talking to actual people in real life and talking about the project, we would love for you to help us share with others. Here's all sorts of places you can find us, from the basics of the web to Instagram. We have a long form web newsletter on Substack. We'll be peeling off some into another newsletter soon. We do have a YouTube page that will have more of our videos soon. And of course, you can always reach out to me or any of our board members via email. And I believe that is, oops, there we go. That is the end of the presentation. So thank you so much for being here and participating. And I am going to stop sharing and see, Blakely or Philip, if you have any questions or comments.